It's your boy, the King of Lightning, coming at you live with the fresh, well, actually, no, not live. It's a video, but nonetheless, coming at you with the fresh new cut. I'm feeling very liberated. There is a collaboration with Oda Kishimoto this chapter, and finally, the Californian wildfire that has been raging all across Onigashima may finally be dealt with in the next chapter or two. If you haven't checked out my live stream reaction to the chapter, link in the box below to Cole Requiem for the entire full live stream, as well as twitch.tv, no doubt about that. For this chapter review, if you don't know, now you know, we have three major parts. We have the pacing, the structure, and of course character. And then after those three major parts, we're going to go right into our thoughts and find the rating. Now, when it comes to pacing, unfortunately, it is what it is. This video is very little on the frills, particularly focused on the analysis. Unfortunately, there are not enough fingers on my body to indicate to you the number of parts for pacing for this chapter, which for me is, I say that's a no. That's an absolute no when it comes to pacing structure. Oda wants to damn near show everybody. He doesn't necessarily have to, but he feels like he needs to. And my God, for this chapter, we get damn near everybody. For this chapter, we have 12 parts for pacing. Number 1, Luffy and Kaido. Number 2, Nami and Chopper. Number 3, the castle basement with the gorilla gifter arm dude. What? Number 4, the first floor Beppo. Number 5 is basement with Brook and Robin. Number 6 is Sanji in the pleasure hall. Number 7 is the basement again with Apu. Number 8 is Usopp in the basement again. Number 9 is the right brain tower with Frankie. Number 10 is the 4th floor with Raizo and Jinbei. Now those guys get big ups because for their part, they actually do kind of bring in other sections for like the 3rd floor and the 4th floor, which would be part 10 essentially, as the hydro pump goes through all those floors. And then part 12 finally is outside with Yamato and Momonosuke in conjunction with Chopper falling, apparently, for some reason. And then, I mean, Chopper's always ass, and he's fallen for some reason. And then, of course, in conjunction with Luffy versus Kaido. So, again, way too many individual parts, I would personally argue. Too many of these moments seem unnecessary, and they just seem like filler, like to give, again, the characters something to do. Why is there a shift to the random gorilla arm gifter dude? Why Apu and Ibi? Why even Usopp? Now you could argue, hold on, okay, Usopp, it's actually foreshadowing because we do have Hamlet say in that moment in the Viz, it's literally a drop in the bucket, and we need a lot more than a bucket. Obviously, that'll be some foreshadowing here for Jinbei and Raizo and the much bigger bucket, but it just seems kind of unnecessary because ultimately we understood for a while now that the fire was raging on throughout the entire castle of Onigashima and it was being heavily damaged. And a lot of these parts seem very redundant.
It's all there, black and white, clear as crystal.
Number 2, character. Off the rip, our main boy, the monkey massive Nika D. Luffy. Luffy doesn't know what to name his attacks in Gear 5 just yet. This just shows how new and how sudden this form is to Luffy. He did have some named moves in the last chapter, but a lot of those moves are kind of just tailored for Kaido. Like, who the hell else is gonna be so big enough to where Luffy can literally jump rope skip him in giant form? Yeah, so honestly, only Kaido. And let's say Momonosuke is a bad guy in the future, I guess Momonosuke too. And then the other moves that we've seen in that last chapter were moves that he could do outside of Gear 5, i.e. his Fusen, and they don't necessarily count as like a Gear 5 specific move per se. Only the giant form, the Gigant, is an exception, but ultimately speaking, the point still stands, where there are no named attacks that Luffy has right now in Gear 5. Therefore, showing that he has a long way to go to actually master his Gear 5. Now, on a side note, because Luffy's actually struggling to create new names for his attacks, for his new attacks in Gear 5. This might be a roundabout way of Oda proving that during the time skip, he probably came up with Snake Man then, or at least sometime before fighting against Katakuri, since in Snake Man, all of his attacks are named. And also, in the Viz Media translation, Luffy says at the beginning of the chapter, "What do you think I should call that last one? Gomu Gomu what? Compared to the scans, Luffy is asking Kaido a direct question in the Viz translation about his own move that he used against him in the last chapter when he punched and stretched in Kaido's head with that attack. So I think this is a play on what Kaido said in chapter 1014 after he punted Luffy off the island and said, Gomu Gomu, what was that again? And then started to laugh, Wado. And know how this was right before Kaido claims that Luffy couldn't be Joy Boy either. So in both that chapter and this chapter, we have kind of like confusion or questions on a Gomu Gomu what in particular. So I think that this might allude to Luffy's final attack on Kaido being an attack that's named after Joy, Sun, or God. Something of that sort. Now the next part for character for Luffy is a very simple but a very iconic and a very important quote. Who am I? I'm Monkey D. Luffy, the man who will surpass you and become king of the pirates. That is extraordinarily refreshing to hear. Why? Because the classic line does clear up allegations of like soul takeovers or things of that sort. Despite the madness that is Gear 5 Luffy, Luffy is Luffy, still Monkey D. And we double tap this idea by Zunisha's own words, there's a feeling of fate is at work here, and putting its hopes onto Luffy. And in the scans, he says specifically that he feels like he can trust this boy. So he's not familiar with who Luffy is at all. But Luffy is emulating Joy Boy because he probably has the same fruit that Joy Boy had long ago. So the beginning of this chapter does clear up a lot of allegations that some folks make towards Luffy without a doubt. Now for Luffy, character part 3 is he's able to actually mold to Kaido's Kundali Dragon Swarm instantly, which is not new, but is able to snap back into place immediately, instantly after the attack. That is new, because in the last chapter, when he took Kaido's attacks, his body shape stayed molded for a few seconds. Hence that 3, 2, 1 in the last chapter. So there are various reasons as to why this could be the case, but I get the feeling that ultimately depends on the force of the attack. Kaido's Kundali Dragon Swarm, I don't think has the same power as the previous 2 attacks that Luffy molded to in the last chapter, because this attack seems to be focused more on speed rather than power. Just how Snake Man is more of an attack speed form compared to Bound Man, which is more of a raw power form. Hence is why Luffy could actually snap back into place quicker. But once again, there are a lot of options as to why this is the case, obviously. Now, number 4 for Luffy, for his character, is that the attack that Luffy hits Kaido with seems to be an unnamed Gear 5 version of his Gatling. It might be at the speed of Gear 2, since it's several shots at once, and in order to go into Gear 5, in the first place, he has to use the old Gear 2 stance. This is a very important thing here, right? This means that Luffy's blood flow is already pumping at a much faster rate. When he does it Kaido, and we see Kaido's body expand like a rubber band, maybe he's doing more internal organ damage in the process too. That's my guess. I'm not too sure. And then lastly, number 5 for Luffy in character is that Luffy has a lightning bolt in his hand at the end of the chapter, which is insanely hype. Now, we don't know the details and the specifics on what's going on exactly here, but it appears to be stationary, like it's not leaving Luffy's own grip. So I have a video coming on in the future later this week talking about that particular panel. But just note to how insane this might be for Luffy and the future for what Gear 5 can do. So that is all the Luffy components for character for this chapter. Now, let's get to another character here, and that is Kaido. Kaido has 2 bits. Number 1, Kaido has a high-speed version of his Kundali Dragon Swarm that we saw in chapter 1037. Back then, it looked like Kaido's club had gotten bigger to match Luffy's Gear 3, but now it's several instant strikes at once, similar to Luffy's Gear 5 Hydra. And I also will note too is that Luffy seemingly can't react in time to this version of the Kundali Dragon Swarm, just how Kaido seemingly couldn't react to the Gear 5 unnamed Gatling that Luffy gives Kaido after that Kundali Dragon Swarm. That could be a sign just to show you how fast these attacks are moving. Number 2 for Kaido is that Kaido can do air cuts with his club. That's actually really impressive. Kaido's just kind of nasty, where he can do air cuts with his club. And it seems to be that his demolition gust technique we see in this chapter is actually the straight line focused version of the Dragon Twister demolition breath we see in chapter 1003. So another alternate version of a previous attack that Kaido did before. Now the next character focus here is going to be Raizo of the Mist, aka Raizo Uzumaki, the 7th Mizukage and the 6th Yonko. Raizo does go through some character development here. Raizo has learned from his past mistakes with Oden Castle, which for him was not that long ago, since he did jump 20 years into the future from the past. And even though he had the ability to save them, he was clearly lacking in foresight and preparation. And as a ninja, that's hella hard to cap. And it's fitting that he's actually using the waters of Zou, since the people of Zou did sacrifice a lot to protect Raizo. Raizo himself, in chapter 818, lamented seeing the city in ruins and promised that he would work to make this right. And here we are, almost 230 chapters later, Raizo is seemingly doing what he promised back then in Zou. So Raizo is actually one of the stronger scabbards in terms of character, I think without a doubt. Speaking of strength, when it comes to Raizo, because this man's powers, his ninja way is very, very strong. My guy approves, because Raizo's Ninpo Scroll ability can actually store material within it for seemingly an indefinite amount of time. There is no limit to the power of the Nin Scroll. What's also crazy is just the amount of water that Raizo's holding within that scroll. The blast breath that he absorbed from Kaido was a huge amount of fire. But if this water really does snuff out all the fire in Onigashima, then it's even more water in comparison. So Raizo's scrolls are pretty much like an RPG storage window. It's very impressive what this man can just store in his scrolls for an indefinite amount of time, mind you. So Raizo gets a fat W in this chapter. Now, next character to focus here, Jinbei. If there is enough water around, Jinbei can do aquameas. And these aquameas are so powerful, they actually make giant holes in the floors of the Skull Dome. It's a pretty impressive feat, I'd say, considering just how gigantic, how titanic the Skull Dome in size really is, knowing that there are crawl spaces in between these floors too, and Jinbei is busting through all of them right now. To be fair here, the force of the water could be what Raizo's scrolls are producing, and then Jinbei is simply redirecting that force downwards. So all in all, when it comes to character, Raizo does have the most character component for this chapter, without a doubt, but Luffy is actually pretty solid here too, and it is very refreshing hearing those magic words, no doubt. Now finally, the story component for this chapter. Number 1, Luffy versus Kaido continues. That easy. Number 2, Kaido explains in greater detail what a Devil Fruit Awakening is.
You had my curiosity, but now you have my attention.
The awakening is what happens when your mind and body catch up to your powers. This helps clarify that Devil Fruit abilities have insane potential, but the user needs to train their bodies to the point where they're actually capable of handling the awakening's power. And then on top of that, the idea of the mind itself catching up to the Devil power is in lockstep with what Crocodile said years ago about how the more creative you are with your powers as a Devil user, the stronger you can become. And also, the word ridiculous is bolded in the Viz, and it probably indicates how creative Luffy's powers can be, and how Oda himself stated years ago in SBS that he wanted to give Luffy such a ridiculous power. Otherwise, he couldn't really continue with the series. Now, number 3 for story is Beppo. Beppo can't fight because of the heat. Okay, whatever. Now, number 4 for story, to indicate how much damage that the island has taken over the course of this raid, we find out through Sanji and the Pleasure Hall girls that the water garden that was outside of the Pleasure Halls that Kinemon and Sanji and Chopper and company passed through at the beginning of the arc has now been destroyed. It has fallen off the entire island. And right now, that is an obstacle that they have to deal with. On a side note though, the mouse Chuji is actually on Sanji's shoulders. Not only do we have some Gordon Ramsay, Ratatouille, Max Michelin star chefs right here, but also I couldn't help but think about Sanji being Ash Ketchum and Chuji being Pikachu. Hey yo. Oh man, I promise you, it wouldn't take that duo 900 seasons to win a single tournament. That's number 4. Number 5 is the big play. The big play on the part of Raizo and Jinbei, where on the 4th floor, they have this gigantic hydro pump and water is filling up all the floors below the 4th floor. But on a side note, there's a very small few panels of Raizo talking to Inodachi on Zou, and this is actually before Jack invaded Zou, before he invaded Zunisha, correct? Because we see Inodachi's head and there are no bandages on his head in this flashback. But for the entirety of the Zou arc, there are bandages on his head. So this is the first time we're actually seeing in a flashback some glimpses and some moments of what was going on Zou before Jack invaded. Now number 6 for story is Killer. For some strange reason, Killer is unable to, okay, maybe his men, for like laughs and honor, that combination right there, are trying to carry Kid around, but it looks like for the most part, he took a lot of damage. You know, yeah, I guess he took a lot of damage from the Hawkins fight and then off-screen events that we just don't see. Number 7 for story is a big one too. According to Yamato, the island is about to fall ASAP. Now. Click on the big red button, smash it. Because the island's gonna fall within the next few chapters, according to Yamato. So what she said and what happened in chapter 1027, after Luffy and Kaido split the sky with a Conqueror's Haki clash, a major one, and then we see chunks of rock falling from the island, and Yamato stating that Kaido's powers were weakening. This is now being revisited again, and it looks like it's happening really, really soon. It's gonna drop. And this may mean Momonosuke's powers come in clutch really soon. But at the same time, Momo says Kaido isn't dead yet, which gives you the idea that maybe it's a bit premature on her part to have Momonosuke do these flame clouds now, potentially. So there are 2 cases I got in mind. Number 1 is that Kaido's getting knocked out in like the next few chapters, like let's say 150, something like that, right? And then she has that much faith in Luffy to actually knock out Kaido ASAP, which is crazy, but also knock him a status, have faith in the captain. She's not a strategist yet, but she's close. That's number 1. Or number 2 is that Kaido himself needs to consolidate his remaining power to fight against Luffy. I can't have these flame clouds be used right now. Therefore, that would indicate a soon coming awakening, potentially, on Kaido's part, since Kaido is very familiar with awakenings. Obviously, we'll see in the future how that goes, but there is a possibility here where even after the flame clouds are destroyed, Kaido is still fighting, and in fact, even powers up. That is a possibility, okay? So, that is the overall story cup of this chapter. Some nice leaps into the conclusion of this act/arc, but there are some minor things that will probably need more clarification in the anime, because the manga, given Oda's pace right now, that's not happening. So overall thoughts. This chapter, I think, is pretty good outside of the pacing. The pacing, I think, is the one thing where I'm like, oof. No. Character, pretty good. Story, good as well. And that last panel,
Here I come. Oh, here I come.
Oh, man. That last panel as the Kingu of Lightning, way too hype. So hype, it requires a whole video in and of itself. I don't care what you say. Yes, for one panel. However, this video is about the analysis, not the frills. And if we throw away the fanboy in me, this chapter rating, I think, is a very fair 7 out of 10. That is correct. A very fair 7 out of 10.